Hey everyone, what if I told you that being good with money has almost nothing to do with how smart you are and everything to do with how you act? That's the big idea from Morgan House's amazing book, The Psychology of Money. So today, we're going to dive in and figure out why our brains, not our calculators, are the real secret to building wealth.
So, let's kick things off with a question that really gets to the heart of it all. Why is it that so many brilliant people, we're talking doctors, lawyers, engineers, make such mind-bogglingly bad decisions with their money? I mean, you'd think being a genius would make you rich, but so often, that's just not how it works out.
And here it is. This is the big reveal. The reason is that managing money isn't really a math problem. It's a psychology problem. It's not about the numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the stories we tell ourselves, the weird biases we all have, and the emotions that get in the way. It's all about behavior.
All right, so let's get into it and explore why we're all, frankly, a little bit weird when it comes to money. In this first section, we're going to uncover some of those invisible mental scripts that are running the show, usually without us even having a clue.
Okay, first principle, and this one is so important. No one's crazy. What seems like a terrible financial decision to you might make perfect sense to someone else based on their life experiences. I mean, think about it. Someone who lived through the Great Depression is going to see risk in saving in a totally different light than a kid who got rich on crypto. Their experiences are their reality. Neither one is crazy.
And this leads us to something we really have to wrap our heads around. Luck and risk are two sides of the same coin. When things go our way, it's so easy to say, hey, look how smart I am. But Housel reminds us that luck plays a huge role. And on the flip side, when we fail, it's not always because we messed up. Sometimes, that's just risk showing its face.
There's also this constant battle going on in our heads. For some reason, pessimism just sounds so much smarter and more compelling. A story about a market crash grabs our attention immediately, right? But the story of slow, steady, long-term growth, well, that's kind of boring. And that bias can trick us into making terrible panic decisions when all of history tells us that patient optimism is what wins in the long run.
Okay, so we've established that we're all a bit irrational with money. But you know what? Just knowing that is a huge first step. So let's move into our next section and look at how this psychological approach totally flips the script on how real, lasting wealth is actually built. Now, this is probably one of the most important ideas in the whole book, the massive difference between looking rich and being wealthy. Looking rich is easy to see. It's the fancy car, the designer clothes. But real wealth, that's invisible. It's the money you didn't spend. It's the savings and investments that are quietly growing behind the scenes. Wealth is basically the income that you haven't turned into stuff yet.
So what grows that invisible wealth? Well, it's the absolute magic of compounding. And it's so hard for our brains to grasp because for years it feels like nothing is happening. It's just slow, steady, boring growth. And then, all of a sudden, it explodes. The best example is Warren Buffett. Something like 95% of his entire net worth came after his 65th birthday. The lesson is that getting the highest returns isn't the key. It's getting pretty good returns that you can stick with for a really long time.
And get this, success in something like investing isn't about being right all the time. Housel calls this idea tails you win. Basically, you can be wrong or just mediocre most of the time. But a tiny, tiny handful of your decisions, those few huge winners, are so successful that they end up accounting for almost all of your returns. It's not about batting 1,000. It's about hitting a few grand slams.
All right, so we get our own weird psychology, and we get the mechanics of how wealth is built. But that brings us to the biggest question of all. Why? I mean, what's the point? What are we actually trying to achieve here? Let's dig into that in our final section.
The single biggest danger, especially for people who are good at making money, is this thing called the never enough treadmill. It's the trap of social comparison. You hit your goal, and then you immediately look at the next person up the ladder and move the goalpost. It's a game you can't win, because there's always someone with more. So, how do you get off that treadmill? By aiming to be reasonable instead of just rational. See, a purely rational decision might be mathematically perfect on paper, but if it's so aggressive that it keeps you up at night with anxiety, it's a terrible plan. A reasonable decision is one that's good enough, and, crucially, one you can actually live with and stick to for the long haul.
And that brings us to the real goal, the true endgame of all of this. The highest form of wealth isn't a number in a bank account. It's not about buying more stuff. It's about this quote right here. It's freedom.
The ability to control your own time. That is the greatest dividend that money can ever pay.
So, let's wrap this all up into a new playbook. First, understand your own weird financial psychology. Second, remember that true wealth is what you don't see. Third, be patient and let the power of compounding do the heavy lifting for you. Aim to be reasonable, not just rational. And always, always remember that the goal isn't just more money, it's more freedom.
And so that really leaves us with one final and maybe the most important question. It's a question that no calculator or spreadsheet can ever answer for you. It's all about defining your own finish line so you can stop moving the goalposts and actually start enjoying the game. So what does enough really mean to you?